for joining us. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back. This is our final presentation of the day. I'll introduce myself, Marty Landry. I'm the Executive Director for the Indigenous Wellness Corps. And I do want to thank everyone for participating in today's events. As you're all aware, we're commemorating the first ever National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And as many of you know, Alberta Health Services has been recognizing that every child matters by wearing orange and acknowledging the impacts of a residential school. This year, the federal government has declared September 30th as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So today we honored this through a series of presentations. So welcome to our final presentation, and welcome to our special guest. Joining us today for a discussion is Dr. Esther Tailfeathers and her daughter, Elle-Máijá Tailfeathers, about a very powerful film they created. It was inspired after Elle-Máijá witnessed a radical and profound change in her community. Kímmapiitssini, I think is how you pronounce it. The meaning of empathy is an intimate portrait of survival, love, and the collective work of healing in the Kainai First Nations in Southern Alberta, a Blackfoot community facing the impacts of substance use and a drug poisoning epidemic. Community members active in addiction and recovery, first responders, and medical professionals implement harm reduction to save lives. This work is contextualized with the historical and contemporary impacts of settler colonialism. Kímmapiitssini, the meaning of empathy, draws a connection line between the effects of colonial violence on Blackfoot land and people and the ongoing substance use crisis. Held in love and hope for the future, the film asks the audience to be part of this remarkable change within the community. Here with us today are filmmaker Elle-Máijá Tailfeathers, who is a writer, director, producer, and actor. She is a member of the Kainai First Nations, Blood Tribe, Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as Sami from Norway. She was named the 2018 Sundance Film Institute's Marada Mita Film Fellow and is an alumnus of the Berlin Ale Talent Lab and Hot Docs Accelerator Lab. She has a long list of filmmaking accolades to her name. Her proud mom, Dr. Esther Tailfeathers, who is featured in the film, is also with us. Dr. Tailfeathers, born and raised on the Blood Reserve in Southern Alberta, graduated from the University of North Dakota School of Medicine and completed her family medicine residency in Edmonton at the University of Alberta. Esther has worked in many First Nations communities, including the Blackfeet Reservation in the emergency room, the Blood Reserve for almost 20 years, and has served the Northern Alberta community at Fort Chipewyan. Dr. Tailfeathers is currently the Senior Medical Director, Indigenous Wellness Corps. And I'm happy to say that I work with Esther, and she's a wonderful person to work for. Welcome to you both. We are honored and excited to have you here. But before we get started, let's take a look at the trailer, because I know that some of you had an opportunity to see the film, some of you didn't, but we want to show the trailer to give you a flavor of what the film is all about.
This is home, Ghana, otherwise known as Kainai, or the Blood Reserve. Nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, Kainai is the largest reserve in Canada. Beginning in 2014, fentanyl flooded the illicit drug trade on the reserve. This new reality has forced our community to approach addiction in radically different ways.
Hello. The difficulty was in convincing people that harm reduction is the route that we have to take.
By no means is it celebrating addiction, but what it does is it celebrates the lives of people without judgment.
Our group here is looking at expanding what we have to do to help our community heal.
There you go. I could save a life.
It's very heart-wrenching when you go on a call and people are breathless.
And we can't sit back and expect things to change without doing the work.
Progress notes.
Trying to get off these oxidatives by yourself, it's hard.
The next thing we want to do is address a detox facility on reserve.
History marks the Bloods as some of the fiercest, strongest people there ever was. And I want us to get to that point again. I'm happy for you.
We have a Blackfoot word that's called Kímmapiitssini, which means giving kindness to each other.
Thank you.
And that means also compassion for those who are suffering.
It's an amazing thing that they've done. And in my eyes, they're heroes.
Kímmapiitssini. I think that's how you pronounce it, after hearing Esther once again. What I'd like to do is I'll pose two questions, both for Elle-Máijá and for Esther, and then we'll open up for discussions. And every once in a while, I'll interject with a question here and there, but would like to hear from the audience and participants about this film. But we really do want to explore what this film really means. So the first question to Elle-Máijá, I'd like to ask Elle-Máijá to tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to make this film. And for Dr. Tailfeathers, tell us about your experience making this film.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for having us, and thanks for screening the film. If you weren't able to watch it, it's actually available online through the Calgary International Film Festival right now until October 3rd. I'll share the link I'll share it with Crystal here. She can share it with you. So yeah, if you want to watch the film, you can go online to the Calgary International Film Festival site and purchase a ticket and watch it until October 3rd. But yeah, in terms of the journey of this film, I guess fentanyl hit our community seven years ago, and I was hearing from my mom about everything she was witnessing on the front lines. I was witnessing the immense amount of community mobilization, all of the people who were putting so much effort into finding solutions with so few resources. And I was witnessing this very complicated conversation around harm reduction. And when I started the film, I knew so little about harm reduction. I think I had a very novice understanding of it. And so the journey of this film was also my journey in understanding what harm reduction is. And I wanted to be able to share that journey of learning and understanding with Indigenous audiences in particular, with Kainai, because I don't think it's still something that's largely embraced within the community, although we've made great strides to make change. And it was also an opportunity to share that learning journey with non-Indigenous people. But one of the reasons that I wanted to make the film was because in the news media, especially here in Southern Alberta, I was seeing so many negative portrayals of our community in regards to the opioid crisis. A lot of it was framed through this lens of tragedy and trauma, and they weren't showing that community mobilization necessarily. They weren't really showing all of that hard work that was happening within the community. And we also weren't getting the very deep conversation about, the roots of addiction or substance use disorder within Indigenous communities, and this one in particular. And so I wanted to be able to unpack all of that in a feature-length film as an opportunity to hopefully encourage dialogue within the community, particularly regarding harm reduction and how it can work in an Indigenous community. And I also just wanted to, I guess, put pressure on those who are able to influence policy, especially regarding harm reduction. There's been so many cuts in Alberta for harm reduction services, and that's resulted in a lot of preventable deaths. And so I wanted to be able to, I guess, demonstrate the fact that harm reduction works. It's saving lives. It's just one step in a continuum of care. And this is why it's necessary. And I wanted to be able to show that through the stories of, lived experiences of community members. And there's lots of other reasons why I made it, but those are, I guess, the main reasons.
Thanks, Elle-Máijá. Dr. Tailfeathers, working with you has given us, I guess, a secondhand view, firsthand view of the work that you've done to bring community mobilization to your community. But what was it like making this film? Because I know that you had a message, but what was it like for you personally?
It was actually it was empowering in a way, but also I just wanted to say that I think power. I mean, film is a very powerful tool in helping to teach people and show people what's really happening out there and what's happening in the community. And I think it would be very helpful for other issues as well to see, to film other Indigenous health issues or Indigenous issues. But I think for me, the hardest thing was getting used to the cameras being around, and Máijá has always had cameras and is either doing theater or acting or doing that. So I'm used to her doing that, but it's very difficult to have your day with cameras with you. So that was a little bit of getting used to. But what I really appreciate about this is I didn't want it to be about me and the things that I'm doing, but I wanted to show what our people in the community are doing. And I think it worked two ways. One is that we appreciate the strengths of people that have had really tough journeys, but it also gives them the confidence in knowing that they are appreciated. And then there are a number of heroes that we never see, and there are people like our EMS and our frontline workers and our volunteers. So it's really important to see what our frontline does, and they often do not get accolades, but they do the work. So I'm really happy to see that they are recognized in this film.
Thanks. I have one more question before I'll open it up to the audience. Today is the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So in terms of the film and the content of the film, what does reconciliation mean to you in the context of the opioid crisis in your community? And it's a question for both of you.
Máijá, you want to go first?
I was just gonna say, do you want to go first, Mom? I really struggle with the term reconciliation. I think we really need to focus on the truth right now, and I think we've witnessed some incredible, national mobilization in terms of people's responses to the discovery of the unmarked graves at the numerous residential schools this last summer. But I really struggle with that term reconciliation. I don't think we're really there yet. I think there needs to be a lot of truth telling and just deep listening first. But I guess in the context of this film, I'm so incredibly honored to be from my community. I'm so humbled by the hard work that happens within the community, and I'm so proud of all of the people who have accomplished so much with so little. And that's what I wanted to do with this film. I wanted to give outsiders the opportunity to see the strength and beauty of our community, and to understand the struggles of people who live with addiction, because so often they're dehumanized in so many ways, especially in Southern Alberta. And so I wanted to be able to show to the world that these people are human beings, and they have families who love them, and they have hopes and dreams, and they're doing so much with so little. And so I guess that was kind of one of the goals with this film, was to counter these really harmful narratives that we see of people who are drug and alcohol users in the media, with humanizing portraits of people who deserve love and care and empathy. And I guess in terms of reconciliation in Southern Alberta, especially, it's a real struggle, because there's open hostility towards Indigenous people here. Like, while I was making the film, there's one scene where there's like an emergency meeting that's happening. There's another wave of crisis in the community, and that morning when I was driving to get to the meeting for us to film, I ended up picking up this guy on the side of the road. It was a really cold day. It was a really like cold southern Alberta winter wind blowing through, and I saw this guy standing on the side of the road wearing a hospital gown and slippers. And so I pulled over and picked him up, and he had a concussion, and it was really obvious within just a few minutes because he kept repeating himself, and he was from the reserve. So I drove him home to standoff. And he'd just been let go from the emergency room without a jacket or shoes or a ride home. And it was just so frustrating to see a person who, had a head injury be treated in that way. And that's so normal here at the Cardston Hospital. Another time while I was filming, I think we just wrapped for the day, and I came across this young woman who had also had a head injury, and I took her to the hospital, to the emergency room, and the nurse's first question to her was, "How much have you had to drink?" And she asked in such a dehumanizing, rude manner, rather than treating this young woman with care. Her first question was to shame her and ask her how much she'd had to drink. And then later on, we learned that they just like let her go from the emergency room that night without a ride home or anything like that. And again, that's just like a normal thing here at the Cardston Hospital. And you hear so many stories like that from people who are vulnerable. And so I think there needs to be a lot of action taken within the healthcare system in terms of just treating Indigenous people like human beings, especially vulnerable people, because it's such a massive barrier to their health and wellness if they can't go to the hospital and receive the care and dignity that they deserve. So yeah, those are just kind of things that came up while I was filming, and I think we have a long ways to go. That being said, I'm just so proud of my community, and I hope that this film offers people the chance just to witness a fraction of the strength and beauty of people here.
Thank you for that. I know that some of the speakers earlier touched on what you talked about, which is really this idea and this essence of being human, our human beingness, right? The elder Carrie earlier today talked about looking within our gut to find our sense of spirit, our human beingness, and carrying that forward, not using our head. And our elder Casey Eagle speaker speaks about being a human being, wanting to be recognized as a human being for society or the rest of society to recognize Indigenous people as human beings. And I think that obviously resonated with you, and it's certainly resonating in terms of a theme for the discussion that we've held today in regards to the new day of reconciliation. But what about you, Dr. Tailfeathers? What do you think about that in terms of reconciliation?
Well, I think that the beautiful part about this film is it does the teaching and the connection that needs to be made, and as Randall so eloquently put and told in the trauma and its direct relation to health outcomes for Indigenous people. We see it in characters in the film. George, who's a very good friend of ours, had tears and has had a whole lifetime of strife related to trauma that he experienced as a child. And it's easy for us to sometimes tell the stories, but when you hear it from the people who are impacted and who have been challenged with addictions, it is a huge part of what our people are challenged with, and it's directly related to residential schools. So this is a good time to be talking about that. The second thing that it speaks to is the inadequacy of cultural competence of primary care in the past, and that is most First Nations, and I'm sure the Métis settlements and communities have experienced physicians either who fly in or have come to the reserve to give healthcare, and not recognizing that there is pain that emotional pain that is needing to be treated, but it didn't need to be treated with opioids. And so what happened is, and if you look at the data and the stats for prescribing opioids to First Nations, it's almost twice as high as non-First Nations. So the setup for fentanyl has come from trauma and intergenerational trauma, and the cultural incompetency of physicians who in the past were not aware of the pain inflicted by the trauma and treated it with Tylenol 3s, Percocets, morphine. You know, that the story just can be so broad, but those two issues I think are very important for us to know.
Thanks, Dr. Tailfeathers. I'd like to open it up for discussion, comments, questions. Yep, go ahead, Prakash.
First of all, the 3 sessions I have attended today, I must say I didn't know very little. I know very little, and I wanted to participate in the first session, but when I logged in at 3 minutes past 9, I got the message too full. So all the speakers, but what I like to mention is that many years ago I had taken management course where they said, seek first to understand, then be understood. Far too often, even before the other person has uttered one word, I've made my decision. And as Mr. Bell pointed out, the cookie cutter, I know exactly what is going to be good for you, even before you have uttered one word. So let's do that first, talk to each other, find out what the problem is. And my daughter has got a poster in her kitchen which says, the worst form of violence is ignorance. So if we start learning about each other and talk to each other, find out what the issues are. Otherwise, we become what I call NATO committee, no action, talk only. So thanks very much. It's been wonderful. And I'm very, very pleased that Alberta Health Services organized this. Thank you very, very much to everybody who was involved.
Thank you for that. Most of the organizers are present, so they've heard it directly from you. Thank you. Other questions, comments? Nadine?
Sure. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much to both Maria and Dr. Tailfeathers for, as Indigenous people, for being so incredibly talented, incredible role models. And I just think it's so inspiring, but also as individuals, and the strength and the resilience and the compassion that has come through. You know, I know Dr. Tailfeathers, you know, quite closely, but just I have even more gratitude and just in awe of who both of you are. And so I'm just so thankful for that. I have a 2-part question, and feel free for whoever you'd like to answer, but I'm thinking many of us are, I know after the film was done, this was a question that really stood out for me, but nearing the completion of the film is kind of when COVID has hit, when the impacts of the change of the governments have hit. And I was just wondering, like, what has happened since in the community with the amazing work that you've done, and if there have been other models or if there's other communities that have taken this on. I'm just really curious of it was almost like a cliffhanger because there's been so many changes that have happened since. So if you want to elaborate on the, you know, where things are at today.
Sure. Thank you, Nadine. Thanks for your kind words. Well, I think I can talk a little bit about it. My mom can probably talk more about it. Obviously, there was a massive impact on the vulnerable population in our community, and those living in Lethbridge, living on the streets of Lethbridge. The Sage Clan, who we see in the film, and for people who haven't watched the film, the Sage Clan is kind of modeled after Winnipeg's Bear Clan, and they serve the vulnerable population within the city of Lethbridge. And so the Sage Clan went from, I guess, collecting needles and just checking on people, offering food and things like that, to really doing a lot of overdose responses. So they revived a lot of people who are overdosing. They continue to do so, and their workload is immense now that there's so many people who don't have a place to go. And since the closure of the supervised consumption site in Lethbridge, it's had a very detrimental impact on that population. And so the Sage Clan is really witnessing that. And then, Mom, I think you can talk more about how it's impacted the community here.
Okay, so since that, I mean, there's been a number of decisions that were made that have actually really impacted our population. And just before the COVID crisis and the shutdown, the government had instituted the closure of the safe consumption site in Lethbridge. And so as a result of the combination of not having a safe place to use and have supervision, as well as the isolation, we have seen a definite increase in death due to opioid poisoning in southern Alberta, and that's reflected in the opioid quarterly report. We think it's directly related to the closure of the safe consumption site as well as isolation. So the reports and data are there, but what we feel in the community is the death of many young people alone behind dumpsters, in basements, in places where they had nobody there beside them. So we have lost many more people. We've lost younger people, and I'm sure that they were alone in their deaths. So we do think that some of them were suicides, intentional overdose, because the life of the people in those vulnerable places was so terrible during this time. There were food security issues, especially in the vulnerable population. There were food security issues for everyone in the lockdown because it was difficult to get family members to bring food to their homes. But the population most affected by that is the homeless population who had even greater food insecurity. And so in that way, I think that the population was impacted very harshly by both COVID isolation and the measures that were taken by this government, and it has definitely impacted. But on the Blood Tribe front, we've expanded our continuum of care. We've opened a walk-in opioid or a walk-in addictions clinic. We have been joined by several more doctors who have wanted to help out here. So it's like we put it out to the universe and here came some more help. So we have had Dr. Edelman, Dr. McIntyre, and Dr. Webb join us. So we have a walk-in addictions clinic. We've restarted our task force and we're addressing all of our continuum of care issues. We're increasing our communication between the entities on the Blood Reserve, including our right from social services to housing to education. We all have come together to try to fill in those gaps that are needed in the continuum of care. Our detox, which is called Bringing the Spirit Home, is immensely successful, almost too successful, because it was funded for 24 beds, and at times we're between 41 and 50 people. So we've got people in the hallways, but we are keeping people from harm, and we get them from the detox into treatment. And we have very many successful people who have their children back, who are going back to school, who are employed, who are finding housing. So I think that it was a successful measure.
Thanks, Esther. We have a couple of people with their hands up, Nicole and Richard. So we'll go with Nicole first.
Thanks, Marty, and my apologies for my voice. I'm battling a cold this week, but I guess first comment on the film. It was a really beautiful film, and I just want to thank you for sharing it with us. The pride and the love that you have for your community really shines through in the film. So I just I wanted to thank you for that. And my question is a bit further to the point that you were just making, Esther. What are some of the things that you think that people outside of the community in other parts of the province could do to help, not necessarily, or your community as well as other communities that are suffering the same kinds of challenges within Alberta? You know, like there's a lot of the Alberta Health Services staff in particular aren't necessarily in that south zone. So are there things that others in the within the Alberta population or AHS population could be doing to help?
I think the most difficult conversation of all is the value of harm reduction in saving lives. And, you know, it's at every table everywhere where people are saying, well, you're enabling them. You know, they're not ever going to get out of this cycle if you continue to provide these services. But we have definitely experienced a wider spectrum of grief because we have lost 14-year-olds, 11-year-olds to overdose, as well as, you know, the 20 to 30-year-olds, and the impact of grief on those families is immense. And the pain to families who lose a child to accidental overdose is immense, whether they be Indigenous or non-Indigenous. And so I think that the conversations are difficult, but what we have proven at the Blood Reserve is that harm reduction is a necessary step to saving lives. You can't save the life of somebody. You can't even follow recovery if the person is dead. So that's the main discussion that needs to take place, and the supports need to be there, because the people who are really hurting are the young people that are overdosing in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. And sorry, just one quick follow-up. Do you think that that's something, and maybe this is a loaded question, but do you think that that's something that we can find with this current government? Is there a way to get through to them to realize that harm reduction is a necessary part of this continuum?
Yeah, it's a very difficult discussion because I feel like we've taken many steps backward, and we have lost many people as a result of that. I trust that discussions on a humanistic level need to be taken, and I really applaud my daughter for the film that she's made, because the teaching that comes through that film helps people to understand where we need to go in terms of saving lives and helping people back to recovery.
Thanks, Esther. Thanks, Nicole. Richard?
Hi, I just wanted to say to both of you, thanks for making this beautiful film. My question, forgive me if it was already talked about, but I wonder if the film has been shown at all within Kainai to the people, and what the reaction has been from community members.
Yeah, sadly with COVID, we haven't been able to have a like gathering together as a community. So we did online screenings, and I think the response has been positive. I showed it to everybody who was in the film before we finished the film to make sure that they were all happy with how they were represented. And yeah, I think it's been received positively. I don't know, Mom, have you heard from people in the community?
Yes, a lot of people have responded positively, in fact, with tears or gratitude that that our community has been shown in this light, rather than in a negative, victim type of picture. But I think our community members are very happy to show their strength, and it really does help in a lot of ways to know that we're doing the right thing. Even if other communities don't view us as doing the right thing, at least this has been really good for increasing the confidence within our community that we are doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So I have a question on the chat line. Let's see. Any sites or forums you can recommend to petition the government to support more harm reduction programs and policies? That's one question. And then the other one is, as a foster parent, I've heard so many comments about kids in care's family, ranging from insensitive to downright racist when I have taken children in care to a different healthcare setting. I'm doing my best to educate myself about my role in reconciliation, but other than reporting employees, what steps can I take to be a better ally and stand up to ignorance? So are there any forums or any way to petition the government for better harm reduction policies? And how can this individual stand up to ignorance and be a better ally?
Okay.
Dr. Tailfeathers.
Well, I think it's important to offer support to local harm reduction based organizations. So if there are any in your city or your town, it's important to support them. In Lethbridge, for instance, with the supervised consumption site, it was kind of a massive conversation with the municipal government and the provincial government. And so I think there's a lot of strength in petitioning your elected representatives to support harm reduction, and to try and elect people who are progressive thinkers when it comes to harm reduction. But in terms of forums, I'm not really sure. Mom, do you know?
I'm not really aware of current forums. I think, I think that there's a lot of events happening, but perhaps changing because of possible new measures within the province. But things like missing and murdered Indigenous women, there will be marches in the next couple of weeks. I think what I see is that many of the women who go missing or women who are injured or traumatized are women in a vulnerable population, many with addictions. And we need to recognize that at the missing and murdered table as well, that a lot of that vulnerability occurs when using or within an addiction. I think there are multiple, civic elections, municipal elections coming up. I would encourage people to talk to their candidates about where they stand on harm reduction. Certainly the city of Red Deer, the city of Lethbridge, are very difficult places to be. And I think that there needs to be some common ground found there. So definitely need to talk to the candidates and ask them what their take is on harm reduction.
Thanks, Esther. Any other questions? Anybody with their hand raised? Because I have a question if no one else is putting up their hand. The concept or the idea of empathy came up a lot during today's sessions and the other sessions. And sometimes, when we're looking at the world that we're currently living in, and we're dealing with the history of discovering unmarked graves that the Indigenous communities knew about, and the rest of Canada just discovered. And then the idea of a film such as yours, where the kindness and empathy demonstrated by so many in the film was amazing. And so as a healthcare professional and as a filmmaker, what does empathy mean to you? And how can we foster that outside of our own lives or our own respective areas, so that within the healthcare system that there is more empathy? How do we do that?
I think it's about recognizing the humanity in other people, and understanding that people who are struggling for a reason, for many reasons often, and that just offering the basic dignity of treating people like human beings is a good place to start. In making the film, I learned so much from everybody that I worked with. I was continually just in awe of people like George and Leah, people like Lori and Mariah, because they're treated so terribly and they've been through so much, and yet they continue to wake up every morning and smile and laugh and offer love and compassion to those around them. And so those people are heroes to me. And I think that if we begin to recognize the humanity and the strength and the dignity in people like that, that we can move forward with empathy. And also I think Kímmapiitssini. I think about it also as like as a means for survival. It's what has gotten us through so much, and it's what continues to get us through. And all of the grief that we're feeling in our community from all of the people we've lost, that grief comes from a place of deep love. And so I think it's important to continually move forward with love, and to recognize that love and vulnerability can be strengths, and that that love is a survival mechanism as well.
Dr. Tailfeathers?
I don't think I can say it any better than she did.
Okay, before I ask another question, any other questions? Oh, there's a question from Erin.
Hi, I'm nervous. It's like celebrities. First, thanks for allowing us to see this film. It is amazing, and I feel like I'm going to get emotional just asking this question, but I don't know that I've ever seen a film, like you said, be able to treat people who are going through tough times with so much humanity. And I can't even really put it into words other than that. So if that was your goal, you succeeded. It was beautiful. I sort of wondered, because it is your community, do you think that you would have been able to accomplish that in that way if you were from outside of Kainai?
Well, thank you, Erin. I appreciate hearing that. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that it was a major a responsibility, telling the story of my community and my family. It was a major responsibility, and I had, so many ethical considerations on the table all the time. But I think it was a major advantage because this is the place that I know and love, and I just wanted people to understand how beautiful this place is, especially when it's so often framed from such a negative light, and there's so many racist stereotypes projected onto our community, and that's not the community that I know and love. And so I think it was definitely a strength to be able to be from here, and to be able to document where I'm from. And I think we all have that. We love the place and the people that we come from, and it was a real honor just to be able to tell our story on screen.
Thanks, Erin. The film showed so many stories of struggle, but equally stories of strength and humor and resilience. In the process of making this film, what new or surprising things did you learn about your community?
Mom, do you want to? Or I can answer that, I guess. Sorry, my mom's dog she hasn't seen me in a while, and she's demanding attention. My little sister. I don't know if there were too many surprises. I think there was so much to consider in making this film, in terms of especially the conversation around harm reduction, because I also needed to come from a place of understanding for people who are firmly abstinence based when it comes to thinking about addiction and substance use disorder. There are a lot of people who are staunch advocates for abstinence and 12-step programs, that AA and NA are the only way to go. And so I needed to respect those people's opinions, because those opinions come from lived experience, and AA and 12-step programs have worked for a lot of people, particularly with alcohol, with an addiction or dependency on alcohol. And so I guess that was kind of a challenging aspect of this film, was how to navigate and respect those opinions, while also kind of pushing for the acceptance, or maybe a deeper understanding of what harm reduction is and how it can work within the community. But I guess, yeah, maybe in terms of surprises, the nicest one was the opening of the detox, just to be able to be around before it was even a real idea, and then to witness it open and then be able to document that was really incredible. And I guess I was surprised at the number of people that wanted to share their stories. Like, there were so many people within the community who just wanted to be able to share their stories, and that's a really vulnerable place to be, and also just a really brave thing to do. And I was just so honored to be able to have their trust in that way. And so, yeah, there were a lot of people's stories who didn't end up in the film, unfortunately, because there's only so much you can fit into 2 hours. But yeah, I guess just the willingness of people wanting to tell their stories was really beautiful to witness as well.
Awesome. Dr. Tailfeathers, is a question for you. This person is an international student who still learns about Indigenous people and their traumas, which affected me a lot and helped me to return and learn about my own roots. So this person wants to ask Dr. Tailfeathers how she decided to go back to her community to serve them after her degree. Was it always what she wanted?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I think one of the sayings from the medical school I went to is dance with those who brought you here. So my community is who brought me to medical school, and always at the back of my mind was the reason I was doing medical school and the reason why I was gonna become a doctor, so I could come back to the community and help. And so it has always been in the back of my mind and the front of my mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the questions I have in terms of the film itself and the message, with Alberta Health Services, because many people here on the line are from Alberta Health Services, there are others in the healthcare profession, and being able to participate in watching the film, and then certainly the ones that weren't able to, and the ones that were able to look at the trailer, it brings up a lot. It brings up, well, probably brings up a lot in terms of, oh, we didn't know this, we didn't know that. I think someone mentioned that, I think it was, or I forget who mentioned that, Nicole, not everyone knows what it's like in the South, right? I've been in Alberta most of my life, and it wasn't until about 20 years ago that I got my first visits to the South, to the Blood Reserve, Pagani, Eden Valley, places like that. It was really my first venture into those areas. But as a healthcare professional, I worked in Edmonton, and so my focus was really Edmonton based, and maybe the northern community people that came into the Edmonton area. So what message do you want Alberta Health Services to learn from this film, and how do you want us to use it?
I think that the message that I would like to, or that I see from this, is that we need to trust and support Indigenous communities in building their own solutions. And if it isn't for Indigenous communities, then let's welcome Indigenous voices to the decision-making tables so we can make the right decisions and the right strategies for people who need to be there. They need to be at the decision-making tables. And as one of our leaders, Val, always says, nothing about us without us.
Yeah, and what she said, I think. But maybe also that people living with substance use disorder need to also be welcomed to the table, because they have so much to offer. They have a wealth of knowledge through lived experience. And I think so often they're just left out of the conversation, and solutions are crafted without their participation. And so I hope that their voices are centered.
Thanks. We do have a question from Randall. He's got his hand up.
Sorry, I forgot I had my hand up. Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Tailfeathers. It's a 9-part question. No, I was just going to ask, you know, as somebody who's been instrumental, obviously, in setting up such an amazing program in your own community, you know, what are the challenges that we face as planners in trying to move this out in terms of scale and spread to other communities struggling with opioid? And I mean, you know, beyond the obvious, you know, levels of leadership that put ideology before science, what are some of the obstacles that you see that lie ahead of us in that way?
I think the biggest obstacle is, and the hardest thing to do, is to change minds. So I think that our challenge is to do the educating, to do the discussion, to do the listening, and knowing that all Indigenous communities are not the same. And some people, like some communities that are very remote, have not been affected as much as the urban communities, or those communities are very close to urban centers. So I think there's a whole spectrum of addictions that we are experiencing. And as Maya portrays in the film, many of us are abstinence-based thinkers, and many of our Indigenous leaders are abstinence-based thinkers, and they think that with alcohol, you know, it is, I mean, the ultimate goal for everyone is abstinence and having a healthy, happy life. But we recognize through the work that we are doing that that some people can't achieve that overnight with a decision. They need a lot of support to get there. But there is no cookie cutter solution for the communities other than looking at other places, looking at evidence-based medicine, and looking at strategies that have worked. Our community, we're very fortunate that in the beginning, I mean, there's lots of characters in every community, and there's lots of opposition, you know, based on, you know, lateral violence. There's a lot of opposition based on, abstinence-based thinking versus harm reduction. But you got to find some common ground, and finding that common ground comes through science and through data and through convincing people that these are the modes that need to be explored. But I think we've had discussions about this, Randall, that we really need to go to community, hear them out, offer some solutions, and everything needs to be based on a strategy before, you know, or even just a simple skeleton strategy before we start jumping into, well, you know, some communities may not need detox, they may not be there. And the other thing is resource sharing. If one community builds detox and another builds treatment center and another builds outpatient services, then can we share those services or those resources, and not necessarily have every community having the same continuum of care?
Thanks, Esther. Thanks, Randall. We have a question from Kathy, top left-hand corner.
Yep. Hi. First, Maya, I want to say your film was absolutely beautiful, so well done. And I think maybe the greatest compliment I can give you is just that maybe this year I got it. You know, like, it's between the residential homes and finding the bodies and then the Truth and Reconciliation Day. I think your film is huge and it's powerful. Will you do more?
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that. And yeah, thanks for your kind words. Yeah, definitely. There's always work to be done. And I'm just honored to be from Kainai, and I hope to be able to do more documenting of the work that's happening here. There's always exciting things happening in the community, but yeah, right now I'm developing a podcast about finding out what happened to my great aunt, Katepuyi, who was deaf and mute and was placed in a psychiatric institution. And we don't know what happened to her. We don't know where she was laid to rest. And so I'm working with CBC on creating a podcast about finding out what happened to her, and kind of looking into themes like the institutionalization of Indigenous people and also the history of psychiatric wards and women in particular in this province, and forced sterilization and those kinds of things. So that's kind of something that I'm working on right now.
So Maya, where would we be able to find your other works?
Well, I have a feature-length film called The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open. I'll put it in the chat here, which people can watch for free at CBC Gem. And it's also available on Google Play to rent. I recommend Google Play because CBC Gem has commercial breaks, and it's not supposed to be watched with commercial breaks. Oh, hold on. I'm sending it to Nadine, who I guess could send it to everybody else. So yeah, those are that. And again, Kímmapiitssini, if you haven't seen it, is available to watch at the Calgary International Film Festival till October 3rd online. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's it.
Okay. Is this, just before I get to Prakash, is this film suitable for elementary school age?
The documentary, or?
Yeah, the documentary, yeah.
I don't know. That's a really good question. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. Mom, what do you think?
Well, there's no sex and violence on it. So, I mean, I would say maybe from age appropriate, maybe from early teens, 11, 12-year-olds. Before that, I think it isn't age appropriate just because it's got so deep content.
Okay. And I see Prakash had his hand up as well.
Yes, this is not a plug for CBC, but tonight at 8 o'clock, they're having a 1-hour program without commercials. So if you want to watch it, this is for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So I'm looking forward to it. And as the filmmaker said, there's no commercial during the 1 hour. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Prakash. Well, then I see that we are at the end of our time. I want to thank our guests and our participants for a great discussion. And of course, we're going to promote the film. So we hope that the ones that haven't seen the film are able to see the film. We appreciate Maya and Dr. Tailfeathers coming with your heart and your soul to the discussion. I know that during the making of this film, you've obviously witnessed and have been a part of some really tragic and or circumstances, but also a lot of resilience, humor, and humanity within the whole spectrum of what's going on in your community. So thank you for bringing yourselves and your community to us and to this day for our very first day for National Truth and Reconciliation. We appreciate that. And we also want to say a special thanks to the National Film Board for allowing us to share it exclusively with AHS staff. And for those of you who weren't able to see the film, watch for its release in your local theaters. And of course, it's the Calgary International Film Festival that's releasing it. And you can check the National Film Board's website for release details. And so now I'm wondering if we do have Emil Derosher, our cultural helper lead, on the call.